Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you so much for taking the time. I'd just like to ask you a few questions. It was a really interesting presentation there and panel session. I think, we had the crisis during COVID. Shipping lines made lots of money. Shippers experienced quite a lot of difficulties. What have we learned from that, and what learnings from that is Maersk taking for its dealing with its customers?
Yes, there are a few things that we have learned. I'll look at it. I'll describe it in several dimensions to keep it easier to follow. First is conceptually in terms of how should we engage our customer. One key error and the learning point for Maersk, and I believe the broader industry, is that we did not engage our customer frequent enough. I think in general in ocean shipment, there's always the assumption that things will go well, and in general it's a longer lead time, right? 20, 30 days trans-Pacific. You don't have to do anything. Nothing will happen except for the rare occurrences of piracy. But now, during the COVID periods, suddenly 2-3 days before ETA, suddenly there's the port entire operation stop. Therefore, this one thing is to always have continuous engagement with our customer, frequent updates, in order to create that level of visibility. Because if not, then perhaps Maersk have some form of understanding of the situation. The customer may be misaligned, and that misalignment create lag time in our response. So that's one, more frequent, or more of continuous engagement and information. And from there, the learning point becomes visibility, which enabled by technology. While Maersk, in general, we always been pushing for greater visibility, having that tech platform to combine the different logistic products to really complete that end-to-end control and visibility. That COVID-19 situation really accelerated the need to do that. By that means, to put it into practice, one, is impossible to request the customer delivery team or the customer, in fact, themselves to always check their emails for regular updates. It doesn't make sense. Then you start bombing them with too much information. What will make sense is to have a milestone tracking that's available to the customer on a web platform or whichever messaging apps that there is more prevalent in usage in the customer jurisdiction. So that is the second on visibility enabled by tech platform, which we have made significant progress, more so in certain geographies where it's more mature, but this is enabled by that. And lastly is on an operational basis. This again goes back to for the past, prior to COVID, the ocean shipping industry, or in general logistics, have only been facing, the main challenge has always been the cyclical nature of the industry, downturn, up, and the bullish period. That's it. There was no exact situation where unpredictability prevailed to the extent where suddenly everything just stopped. And that necessitates rigorous contingencies planning. I was fortunate to be involved on such project whereby we truly have to map out the worst case scenarios. Of course, we are looking at it from the perspective of a logistic operation. Therefore, we didn't have to detail out what is the geopolitical implication, for instance, or the dynamic in greater details, but it's to truly map out having contingencies for every single scenarios or implication to the supply chain for our customers and for our own operation. Now, the reason behind that, contingency planning is not just a decision tree. I think that boils down to the final output and also how would people react to that. The challenge is in a large organization. Many of the attendees here today is people have their own perspective on how to do things. Therefore, standardization in how to respond is necessary. If not, let's say in Singapore, my counterpart in Singapore were to do A, and someone else in Europe or in NAM would do B, C, and D. And that severe misalignment only exacerbates the issue of disruption, if anything. Therefore, really across those three pillars, starting with the conceptual, and then we go into technology and operationally, from a process point of view, what we have done and will continue to do as we are really facing the new challenge of the uncertainty from geopolitical tensions.
Yeah, I mean, in some senses, the container markets are returning to normal, that cyclicality you mentioned. But yes, we do have those geopolitical and other tensions as well. In terms of your relationships with your customers, has that now changed, and will it change moving forwards?
It has changed for the positive. I think this is all public information, whereby during the COVID period, most ocean shipping companies, they truly, they capitalize on the opportunity more so than other players. Maersk as one of those who try to use that as an opportunity to build partnership instead of jacking up the rates as much as possible. So what we did is we signed longer term contract instead of putting a spot. I think compared to the market during that period, Maersk has a lower spot contract proportion, and we use that to gain the trust of the customer, because fundamentally our strategy as a company is to leverage our ocean relationship as a backbone to expand and to also help customer realize the value of the integrated strategy. And that requires trust, because to be fair, we are still relatively new in the logistic and services game. Our backbone is still ocean. Hence, if anything, upon the conclusion of COVID, our relationship with customer has become deeper, and we have gained their trust. That we are not there just to make money out of them. We do take opportunities to reduce the disruption in the supply chain, oftentimes at a more optimized cost compared to competitors. So I think that's, to keep it short, in summary, that will be our relationship with customers closer, more oriented towards collaboration. And that is indeed what is the building block towards developing an integrated supply chain for our customer with the customer. I think that's most important.
Yeah, you mentioned that developing the integrated supply chain. Obviously, Maersk has been on this journey to become an integrator since about 2016, I believe.
Yes.
Where are you now on that journey, and what more needs to be done if we look at the Asia region?
There are two elements. One is the scale. I think compared to Europe, NAM, where we have more scale, more footprint. By scale, I mean footprint. That has made more progress. In Asia Pacific, we do have a certain degree of footprint. For example, tangible one would be the acquisition of LF Logistics. The reason being footprint or scale is necessary because it's a global supply chain. We need some form of presence, outsource, in-source, or otherwise, in all of the keynotes where it matters for our customer. To give a very simple example is that we both need in China, for instance, we do need a warehouse in both Shanghai and Chongqing, which is apparently Chongqing, I only found out relatively recently, the largest city in China. See, is that this is where the customer supply chain operates. So we need to build further that scale, both in terms of the geographic scope and as well as the supply chain capacity. So that's one. Second is really having a seamless integration of all the operations. Now, if by that means is that there's always a tendency of more of this big distinction, large distinction between integrated and bundling. Because bundling means it's like you go to McDonald's, for instance, you add different menu and then you get a complete meal. That's not how integrated is supposed to work. Integrated goes beyond that to actually have a seamless operation where 1 + 1 = 3. So that's the ambition. And it's still a question that we're trying to answer ourselves. Both, what does it mean for us, operation, people, technology, and second is what does it mean for the customer? Because it goes both ways, whereby the customer supply chain, how they set up their supply chain and the organization, their procurement team, a lot of them are still localized on a country per country basis. Everything has to to a certain extent be integrated. Now, in terms of the technology and processes, where we are today as a company in Maersk, we have made significant inroad where we took the opportunity during COVID period to really build up our basis. And indeed, during that period, there was massive inflow of cash surplus we wisely utilized for such advancement. And there's still more to go, primarily because the process and technology also change according to the scale we're building. So we're still heading there. but we're heading towards the right direction. And I think the recent reorganization and also what we have been doing the past 1 year to really set up the right organizational setup to build towards that more efficiently and faster as well.
Okay, it's really interesting to hear how that is progressing, and I'd love to come back and talk to you at a future edition of TOC Asia and see where you are on that journey going ahead. Thank you so much for taking the time,
Yes.
Nicholas.
And thank you so much for the question. I'm really happy to be here.